Welcome to Folklorama at Home, the virtual experience, brought to you by the Manitoba government's Safe at Home program. My name is Tanya, and I'll be your tour guide as we check out cultures from around the world, including some in our own backyard. If you would like to chat with us today, feel free to do so in the chat bar below. Otherwise, grab your passports, sit back, relax, and today we're heading to Ukraine with our friend Raylene. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
I'm excellent, thank you. So tell me, you are I'm going to call you the master baker. I know others, it's a whole other discussion about family, and we all know where we rank, but how did you get started in this beautiful Ukrainian bread making?
Well, growing up, Ukrainian culture was obviously, we were very deep in it. And so my grandfather and I used to make Paska every year, my Guido, before Easter. And obviously as the centerpiece of your Easter basket with the kubasa and the pickled herring, which I never touched.
I know, yeah.
And all the things, and it was our tradition to do together, to make the stuff for our basket, fill our basket, and take it in together. And then you're supposed to wait until Easter Sunday. That never happened between us.
Did.
We always snuck a little bit and had a lunch right after.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So it was fun.
And you've been Ukrainian dancing as well, your life?
Yes, I started Ukrainian dancing when I was approximately 3.
Wow.
And then I took a hiatus for a few years, and I put on my boots one last time for Zoloto's 25th anniversary.
Oh, nice.
And actually my husband decided to join with me that year, so that was a lot of fun. And we danced our last Folklorama together, and that was a few years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what does it mean that you can keep your culture alive and share it with other people?
Well, we have 2 daughters, so it's a lot of fun for them. My cousins also, my cousin and my nieces, they dance with Zoloto as well, so we've continued the tradition of dancing, even though we no longer dance.
Yeah.
The next generation is, and our daughters all dance as well. We only have girls in our family.
Got it,
So-
totally understand. But what does it mean to you to carry on these traditions and teach them? I'm sure you're teaching them the recipes and
Yeah,
the food.
it means a lot. It means, for me, it's a part of my Guido that gets to be with them because he's no longer here.
That's beautiful.
So it's really special that they get to learn these things like I did.
Yeah. And good for you, especially for sharing your culture and carrying on traditions. That's so important. So now Raylene is actually going to take us into the kitchen, and we're going to make bread. Very excited. If you received the kit in the mail, please bring it out and start looking at your recipe. If you want the recipe, we will also have it online and on our website at Folklorama. First of all, thank you for the apron. I love it. I am so, ready to go. Tell us, where do we begin?
Well, the first step is to make sure you have all your ingredients, because I have done this in the past and missed an ingredient or 2.
So true.
Make sure you have everything. Next, you'll take out your recipe, and we'll always start with the yeast. So you want some lukewarm water, not too hot, not too cold. You're going to add a teaspoon of sugar.
To your yeast?
To your water.
To your water.
To help activate the yeast.
I did not know that.
And dissolve that. Now, the recipe says to sprinkle the yeast on top and leave it. However, over the years, I have learned that it activates quicker if you give it a slight stir. Don't mix it too well. This recipe is very finicky. Bread making is always very finicky, too.
It always is, eh? It depends on your oven. It depends on, moving from houses to houses. I've noticed different
Humidity,
colors,
the
Yeah.
heat in your oven,
Completely.
everything. So you're just going to set that aside for around 10 minutes.
Okay.
And wait for it to get nice and frothy and bubbly. Sometimes it'll grow a lot. It'll depend on how old or fresh your yeast is. It's all gonna taste great though, however it turns out. Just be assured of that.
Got it. What is next?
So we have to wait for that to bubble.
Awesome. We will wait for that to bubble. So while we're waiting for the yeast to activate, tell me about the saffron.
So one thing that none of my original recipes talked about was how to do the saffron. Now, saffron itself should be steeped. So what I would recommend
Like
doing,
tea?
like tea, yeah.
Okay.
So as you see, the water changes color. I already started steeping this for all intents and purposes, but I would take about 1/4 of a cup, maybe a little bit less of the water that you would use for your yeast, and put it in a small bowl. And
So
add
lukewarm water.
lukewarm to warm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long do we steep it for?
As long as you want, really. I kind of just put it aside and let it steep until I'm ready to use it. It's one of the first few things I do. I do the yeast, the saffron, and then I scald my milk so that those are all ready when I am ready to start incorporating the ingredients.
Okay, perfect. So is it the longer you steep your saffron, the more flavor you have?
Yes.
Okay.
And some people will then put the full steeped saffron, dump this whole bowl in, and others will pick out the filaments and just use the water. It's entirely up to you.
Perfect. So next you would scald the milk.
Next, I would scald the milk.
Now
yes.
explain what scalding milk is for those of us who don't know what scalding milk is.
So you don't want it to quite boil, but you want it to get very warm. A slight film will start to form at the top, but you don't want it to go past that. So you don't want it to bubble and you don't want it to burn, but it needs to get very warm.
Now, can we put in like a temperature gauge as the water or as the milk gets warmer? Does that help?
You could. I don't
Okay.
know what the
Do you
accurate
stir it?
temperature would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I stir it to make sure nothing burns to the bottom.
Burn all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds good. And then I guess let's move on to our next step.
Okay. We're going to combine our yeast, milk, and 5 cups of flour. Set that aside.
Okay.
So as you can see, it's starting to get activated here.
Yeah, it's starting to grow.
Yeah.
Ooh, fascinating.
Yeah. The longer, well, yeah.
The longer, yeah. The longer you set it, the higher it rises.
And if you could pass me the milk, please.
Yeah. Got to be careful because it's scalding. So you pour in the whole thing?
The whole thing. 3 full cups of scalded
3
milk.
cups. And how much bread does this make?
This recipe can make 6 small to medium-sized loaves or 3 very large loaves. My loaves, I don't tend to make them as tall as traditional paskas because I use simply my French white corningware or a Pyrex bowl or a pot. Many people will use coffee cans and then add
cans?
Yes.
Oh.
They're a very great size for them, and then add parchment paper around to make it very tall and cylindrical so you don't have anything bubble out. I don't like taking extra racks out of my oven, so I keep them nice and small. But it's all
Makes sense.
preference. Traditionally, they should be tall.
Okay, good
You
to
can
know.
pass me the flour, that would be
Yeah.
great.
Oh, this is heavy. Okay, so how much flour is this?
We start with 5 cups.
5 cups, okay.
We'll be adding,
Now, is it any kind of flour? Is it a certain kind of flour?
I use white all-purpose flour, but baking flour can also be used.
Okay. Have you ever tried it for those of us who may have a gluten intolerance? Is there another type of recipe or another type of flour you could switch out?
So in the past, when I have made any gluten-free breads, I actually prefer at Costco, there's an all-purpose gluten-free flour.
Oh.
And I found that it works very similarly to white flour, white all-purpose flour.
Yeah.
And has a very similar texture. And it's the one that I've used the most.
That's a great tip. Now, what about if you're like dairy intolerant? We were talking about earlier.
Yes.
What about can you switch out the milk for something?
So yes, you can. This recipe specifically uses milk and butter.
Okay.
However, my daughter does have a dairy issue, so we tend to use, if she's going to eat it, which she's a carb monster, so we use oil as opposed to the butter, or any vegan butter will do, as well as water. Just
Perfect,
water
great
as
tips.
opposed to the milk.
Awesome. So,
So,
5 cups?
5 cups of flour.
Okay.
We're gonna,
Do you want me to count as you go in case you forget? I always
right
forget when I
ahead.
do that. That's
This
2.
is 2.
Okay.
I'm gonna start
Love your
incorporating
measuring
after
cups.
this.
Those are really neat.
Oh, I have to stay on trend with everything
Yeah.
here.
Okay.
The measuring cups, the measuring spoons, and the aprons are all on theme for me.
Love it. That's 3.
That's 3, and
You
I'm going to
start
start
to stir?
incorporating it at this point, just so for the purposes of not making a huge mess.
Yeah. It's okay. It's not our table. We're okay. So you just fold it in.
Yeah,
Okay.
I fold it in. If you have like a KitchenAid mixer, it's great for this.
Okay. On the bread.
I use the bread paddle, yeah.
bread paddle, thank you. That's what
Well,
it's
actually, sorry, I start with the paddle, and then when it turns more into a thicker dough, you can switch to the hook.
called. Okay.
Or you can do it the old-fashioned way and just by hand, which also works great. You just get a little more messy.
By doing it by hand, is there, like, if you turn it too many times, there's too much air in the dough, or that's just a myth?
You can't.
I've been
Dough is
watching too many
finicky.
cooking channels during
Yeah,
COVID.
dough is finicky. There's no exact number. It all depends on how it feels.
Okay.
So it's one of those things that unfortunately, until you've done it a lot, you're not gonna know the right consistency. It's a lot of trial and error. So
Yeah, that's what I hear.
if your Paska doesn't turn out,
Try and try again.
you keep trying, and I can guarantee you it's gonna still taste great, no matter how it looks.
You can always give it to your neighbor when in doubt. Spread the love.
So we're just gonna keep incorporating this until it's fully incorporated, and then once it's kind of a silky texture, you're going to put it aside and let it rise until it's bubbly.
And how long do you think it would take to rise?
Now that's gonna depend on your house
Ooh, okay.
and
And where you live, potentially?
yeah, everything, the humidity in the air, the time of year, the temperature of your house, whether you have your air conditioning on, can all affect how long your rising time takes. Now, at this point, I would just put it in the oven or in the microwave without those on, just so it doesn't get a draft. And then because at this point
oven
it's
that's
still,
off?
yeah, an off
Okay.
oven, just so it doesn't get a draft. At this point it's still batter, it's not quite dough yet. So at this point the consistency of it is very similar to a muffin mixture.
Okay.
If you can see that there, it's
Yeah.
starting to get a little bit thicker, but it's still quite runny. And it will be like that until we add the rest of the ingredients, and then that's when it's gonna start looking more like an actual dough.
Okay.
And rising dough is different. So
Okay.
we can talk about
And
that
that's
when we get to that step.
Awesome. Looking forward to that step. So stirring everything in, making sure all your flour is mixed. You don't want to take a bite of your bread and then get that flour texture.
So at this point, you could add the saffron. I usually add it when I add my eggs, just so it gets incorporated around the same time.
Now, is there a reason you do it differently, or just what you've noticed works better?
Honestly, it's just from ease of use.
Yeah.
I just add it all at the same time.
So
It gives it more time to steep as well.
It's always great when you go through a recipe and you find these little tips and tricks that make it go faster, and right, as we said, you improve as you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And all get better with age.
So we're just gonna put this aside. I would try and get it a little less lumpy at home, but
Sounds
there we
good.
go. Put this aside.
So while this is doing its thing, what are we doing next?
We can prep everything else that we're gonna incorporate, so the rest of the ingredients. So I would say let's start with the eggs.
Eggs, okay. And how many eggs do you need right now?
So we need 6 beaten eggs.
Okay.
Here I have 7 eggs. We'll take one out and use it for the egg wash later, which is optional.
Okay. Now, are you a good egg cracker?
I'm an okay egg
Okay,
cracker. Would you like
that's
to
not
help?
bad. I'm sure. However, if any shells go in.
Well, then you have to pick them out.
Okay, deal.
Did you know an easy way to get shells out is to actually use the shell?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's a great
it
tip.
can cut through the egg white and yolk much quicker. So instead of you trying to dig your finger in, my daughter taught me that, and she's
That's a
5.
really
I don't
good-
understand where she even learned it.
Food Network.
Well, she helps my cousin make Paska regularly.
Oh, and you do it with one hand. That's very impressive. I know, over the years you learned. There you go.
All
Thank
right,
you.
I'll just put these in here. That's my discard pile. And now to beat the eggs. There's no real trick to beating eggs. I'm sure most people know how to do it.
I use a whisk, though. I have to say, I don't really use the fork, but obviously you're a trained professional, so you're doing a great job.
If you're going to use a whisk, I recommend a metal whisk.
Okay.
It just seems to work better.
Okay.
I don't actually have a metal whisk at home, just a silicone one, so I figured a fork does the trick.
Now you tip it to the side. You tip it just because for the camera, or is it just
No,
just
I
better for the
actually
air?
I do that naturally. I don't know. I guess to give more liquid. If I leave it down, it's Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know why I do it.
So you blended that really well.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure there's no egg yolk left or...
Yeah, you want to try and get all the stringiness out and make it nice and fluffy, as if you were going to make an omelet or scrambled eggs. Same idea. You don't want the whites and yolks to be separated. You really want it nice and bubbly.
Okay.
So you could keep going at this point. It's good enough for now.
Okay. What is next?
So next, we're actually going to start incorporating our batter and turning it into dough. So for this, you are going to need a very large bowl. This size will work.
Those are beautiful bowls.
I inherited these from my grandfather, actually.
That is the perfect thing to inherit.
Thank
I
you.
remember using them in school. So you're putting the mixture in.
Yes, so first, put your batter in.
Okay.
Your batter should be bubbly.
Like with bubbles in it.
Yes, like almost like, almost like the top of a pancake when you're cooking it. You see all the bubbles?
Yeah.
Very similar, but obviously it's not cooked. So we'll just put this off to the side. And then we're gonna incorporate our eggs and the saffron, please.
Okay, we can do that. Now, are you going to dump it all in or just take out the fragments?
For today, I'm going to dump it all in. Either way will work great. The only real difference is if you use even all the little filaments, the part where the filament is in the bread will be very colored and have a very fragrant taste.
It'll wake up your palate.
Yes, for sure. 1/3 cup of sugar. And lastly, you want to use a 1/2 cup of melted butter.
Okay, and you're using oil today.
I'm using oil today simply because we did not have anywhere to melt butter in our fancy little studio.
In our make-believe kitchen.
And then you start to mix that up. I'm just going to tilt it so you can kind of see all the ingredients.
And how long would you normally store it for, just in case everything is...
Honestly, stir it until it's incorporated. I guess it'll depend on your stirring technique. And once it starts to look incorporated, we can start to add more flour. If you thought we were done with flour, we're definitely not. There's way more.
So how often do you bake bread?
I've actually been baking bread more regularly. We do white bread. I have, as I mentioned before, little girls at home who are obsessed with rainbow bread. So
What is rainbow bread? I don't even know this.
It's white bread that you section into 2 or 3 different chunks, and then you add some food coloring and put it in a loaf pan.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, it's fun.
We'll do another series on that one.
It helps them want to eat sandwiches. They're not really sandwich eaters. They'll eat a whole loaf of bread with no insides.
Of course.
But like,
Yeah.
all right, so as you can see, it's starting to look a little more incorporated. You can see where, right here, I'm not sure if you can see, but you can see the filaments and how they're starting to color the batter.
Right, the saffron.
The saffron, yes.
Okay. Is that, forgive me, is that what makes it more of an orangey color?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So there are many Paska recipes out there. Different cultural backgrounds have different Paska recipes. This is a traditional Ukrainian one, but there are other Ukrainian ones that call for lemon or lemon zest.
Okay.
If you don't have saffron at home and you can't find saffron, you can use turmeric in replacement of it.
Oh. Is there ever any done with orange? Because I swear my father made it with orange.
Yeah, there's definitely done with orange, as well as a Mennonite tradition is to make more of a sweet, fragrant Paska, and then they ice it at the top and sometimes even put sprinkles.
Ooh.
My family prefers the more savory Paska because we use it for Easter sandwiches with like ham and
Oh, that would be good.
or kubasa.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
talking my language.
Homemade hot mustard. It's the best for
Ooh.
sandwiches. If you could pass me the flour, we'll start. Oh, we
Definitely.
forgot to add the salt.
Salt. Okay. I think this
Yes,
is your salt.
that is my salt, and we need 1 tablespoon of salt.
And just regular salt.
Just
Any
regular salt.
coarse, nothing, just regular.
Whatever
Okay.
you have on hand. Try to not like worry too much about your ingredients. One year I completely forgot to add my eggs. Like actually forgot.
How did that turn out?
You know, I put it all in the pans and almost got it in the oven, and I was like,
Sums off.
I forgot the eggs. So I threw it all back in my KitchenAid with the hook.
Yeah.
And it incorporated the eggs just fine.
Nice.
Yeah, so
Flour's next after you incorporate the salt.
even though this is like a very finicky thing to do, there's really no right or wrong way. You do what feels right to you, and
Like we said, trial and error.
and it's
learn as
gonna
you go.
taste good. No matter what you do, it's gonna taste good.
Made from the heart.
It just might not be as pretty, that's
Yeah.
all. So at this point, you're going to add anywhere from like 6 cups of flour to I'd say about 9 cups. The recipe says up to 10 cups. I'd reserve that last cup for rolling, simply because you're going to end up incorporating some flour in the rolling process. So the first couple cups, I start by mixing it with the spoon, the same as I did with the batter, and then we'll have to switch to actually hand kneading it.
Okay.
So that's 3. So as I'm doing this, I'm just going to talk a bit about what's going to happen once you have your batter or
Okay.
your dough. Once you have the dough, you need it to be kind of a silky texture. It can't be too sticky, but you kind of want to touch it and have it bounce back at you without sticking to you drastically. It's
Okay.
going to be a little bit sticky.
Yeah.
And then once you have that, you're going to find a nice warm place that doesn't have a draft. So I know traditionally, my grandparents who lived on the farm would stuff it under a big duvet in bed, in a nicely made bed.
In an
So-
actual bed.
In an actual bed. They put a tea towel, stuff it under the duvet in bed. That was the best place for their dough to rise. It didn't get a draft, it was warm, it kept the heat and the moisture in.
Wow.
Some people are really lucky to have proofing drawers. I now have a proofing drawer. Before that, though, what I would do is earlier on in the recipe, I would turn the oven on as low as it could possibly go
Okay.
until it beeped and was preheated. So I think my oven goes, the lowest was 220.
Okay.
Turn it on to that, wait for it to beep, turn the oven off and leave it. And then later, put my covered bowl in the oven turned off, but it was still a warm place with no draft.
Okay. And no chance for the towel to catch on fire or anything like
Yeah,
that.
because the oven's off. And
Yeah.
if you're going to do that, use a metal bowl or put a pan under your plastic bowl, because I only tell you this from experience. The plastic bowl will melt and your dough will end up in your oven, and that is no fun to clean up.
That would not be fun. And how long should it stay in the proofing or in the under the duvet?
Okay, so this is also, you're
Still
not gonna,
picturing
you're
that.
not
That's
going to
amazing.
like this answer.
Okay.
It's going to be until your dough has doubled in size.
Wow.
So that can take half an hour to an hour, all the way up to 3-4 hours, depending on your house, the temperature.
So would you recommend doing this recipe starting early in the morning?
Oh goodness, yes.
'Kay.
Start this. Don't
Oh,
start
goodness,
this
yes.
recipe at 7 o'clock at night. You're not going to be going to bed.
Okay.
And
that's
if you
real
let it
great.
rise for way too long,
Yeah.
it won't be great.
So how do you know it's when it rises for too long?
You won't know until it's baked.
Okay.
And then once it's baked,
Trial and error. That's the theme of today's show.
once it's baked, you can have cracks, or it might not rise in the oven. It might rise too much in the oven. That's also going to depend on your yeast. Like I
Oh.
said earlier, and how old your yeast is. This recipe specifically that we're doing today usually rises quite a bit in the oven, so you can cut down on your rising in between time.
Good to know.
So it's still very gooey. We would add more flour here and continue mixing until you have a nice dough.
Okay, so we have all of our bread ingredients. It has, by the magic of television, proofed and it's all ready to go.
It's risen once, doubled in size. You've punched it down. It has then doubled in size again.
Oh.
And then this is where we're at.
Now, quick, just for everybody at home, any certain punching techniques? Like, is it like a Thai bow from the 90s, or is it like
I mean, if you've got some aggression and you want to get it out, by all means, punch that dough. I tend to just lift the sides and fold it back in. But,
Great
yeah,
tip.
however you feel. So now we're going to take some dough out and
Take some dough?
take some dough.
Okay, not all of it.
Nope, because as I had said before, this can make like
Right.
6 loaves.
Right. So how do you know you've taken enough for the one loaf?
Well, I just kind of take a handful.
Is that like a bread knife? What is that?
Yeah,
Contraption?
it's a bread blade, a dough
Oh.
blade, but you can use a knife.
Okay.
It's fine. So, we're gonna have a floured surface. And you're gonna see how it's just a little bit sticky, but it's not like leaving a ton of dough on my hands.
Okay.
That's kind of what you're
That's where
looking
it's
for
at.
here.
Okay.
So, in order to make
You
your
see that saffron too.
yeah, you can really see it right there. There's some saffron peeking in at us. So I tend, for my base of my bread, I make a little ball. So I keep just kind of closing it so it looks nice from the top, so you don't have any cracks.
It's like a dumpling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we'll put a little bit of flour here, and we'll set that guy aside. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna oil or butter or spray, if you have spray oil. We're gonna oil this guy up. Now, this is the point where, if you're very traditional, you can use a coffee can, you can use a large soup can, you can use like a crushed tomato can. Those will all give you nice tall paskas. You can even use a tiny soup can. We've done that in the past for the little kids' baskets. So make sure that whatever it is you're using is well oiled, because you do not want this baby to stick.
Now, obviously, using your hands, but you can use a brush, and you
yeah,
could use
you can use whatever.
a paper towel or...
Yeah.
Okay.
So now I'm just gonna place my little dough baby here in the center, and we're gonna put that off to the side, and we're gonna let that rise on its own. Now,
Do you
at this
cover
point,
it?
yes, we will
Okay.
cover it with a tea towel. I have one
Okay.
of those handy.
And it doesn't have to be a damp tea towel, just a dry tea
Just
towel?
just a tea towel.
Okay.
And you're gonna put it off to the side. You could put it back under the bed. You could put it in the oven, wherever it is you're putting these items to rise. Do that with however many you're gonna make. So if we were making 6, we would get 6 ready and put them aside.
Okay.
You'll notice that this is really small in comparison to the dish that it's in, but it'll get bigger.
And how long does it have to rest for now?
About the same as it was resting in the bowl to rise.
So 3 hours, potentially?
Yeah, potentially.
It's a fun full day.
In that time, you can take your dough to make decorations.
Ooh.
This is the
Now, how
fun
did this
part.
decoration thing begin?
Well, I know that different parts of decorations have different symbolism and different meanings. So if you can pass me one of those.
Yeah. Do you want to start with the one
Any
up
of them,
here?
yeah, the little guy. So this is a wedding korobai. So you can see that there is some roses and some birds. And if I'm not mistaken, the doves represent prosperity and long life.
And the braiding, what does the braiding mean? Do you know?
So I was taught that the braiding is it's the religious aspect of it, of
Okay.
this being Easter bread, just the Father, Son, Holy Spirit of Christianity.
Right.
However, I do believe that the breads themselves, as well as the braiding, predates Christianity. So
So I heard a rumor, I don't know if this
Yeah.
is true, because you know when you read the internet, if you braid the bread, now it's something to do with the wedding. It has to be braided by and made by a married woman.
So I know that the dough itself should
Right.
only, in ancient times, should only have been kneaded and created by, like the ingredients should be incorporated and the dough itself should just be kneaded by married women.
Okay.
And the bread needs to be baked in a hearth, and it can only be placed in the hearth by a married man.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, was this done like maybe the night before a wedding or leading up to a wedding, or? Because I know even there's some wedding cakes that are made out of bread.
Yes, so this is an example. If you can,
Yeah, just very gently, I feel.
yeah, so this one was made for a friend of ours by her mother-in-law for her wedding. So this is a korobai. So it's slightly different than the recipe we're working with today, But as you can see, bread, especially bread and salt,
Beautiful.
is very big in Ukrainian culture for hospitality.
Okay.
And it's a very big sign of respect. So if somebody presents you with bread, it means that they really are happy to see you and that they really respect you and they're glad to be in your presence.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And that's one of the reasons that in the traditional Ukrainian dance Duvet, the audience is presented with swaths of wheat and bread.
Right. I remember seeing that. I always was wondering. I'm like, yes, I get it. It's bread. I'm hungry. But that's good to know. That's actually a sign of respect and
that,
to welcome you.
yeah, and hospitality,
Yeah.
to welcome.
That's beautiful.
So there are many ways that you can make your decorations. You can roll it and then cut yourself strips. You can also, so like this, you would just take a knife and cut 3 strips to make your braid.
Okay.
We'll start that.
It smells really good. I wish you could smell it right now. We need smell-o-vision.
So when you're braiding, you want to make them as equal as possible. Simply, these ones are not that equal, but simply because one will cook quicker than the other if they're different widths and densities.
Okay.
And then it's just braiding. You just fold it over, fold it under. So the reason that I don't have these rising with the rest is because then your decorations will get way too big and you won't be able to tell what they are.
Oh, that's a
that
great tip.
happens.
Yeah.
So
Oh, wow.
just braid. Or you can take pieces. This is how I tend to do it because I don't love rolling with the rolling pin. And I just kind of roll it in my hands, stretch it a bit.
Would you bake that away from the bread or on top
You're
of the
going to
bread?
add that to, you just put them aside for the moment, but you're going to add them to your dough, your pans,
Okay.
once you're ready to put it all in the oven.
Okay. Got it. Now, what are you doing now? Is it like a different type of braiding technique?
Yeah, I'm
or
just
is-
showing
okay.
another way to braid. So it's just
Awesome.
rolling it into strips. Oh, that one fell apart.
It happens. The nature of bread.
You want to make sure that your hands are nice and floury because otherwise things will start sticking to you.
Now, do your girls ever help you do this part?
This is the part that my girls love. I usually give them some to just kind of play with because they're still very little and the things they make aren't really edible after they've been touching things with their germy hands. But
it's great that you're exposing them to their culture and
it's fun. They get
teaching.
to learn. I learned how to make birds. I want to say I was 6 years old when I first learned, and then that was the only thing I wanted to make. I never wanted to make the bread or the braids. I just wanted to sit there and make birds all day.
yeah. Now, were the birds ever gifts at weddings? I remember
Yeah.
leaving weddings and seeing the birds or having a bird to take home.
Often there would be a bird or 2 birds joined with wedding bands.
Oh, okay.
And it's just kind of a, like, thank you for being here. Again, welcome, we respect you, but also health, prosperity.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So, as you can see, just another braid.
A different way to do it. That's
Yeah,
great.
so now I will show you how to do a bird. Would you like to learn?
I would love to learn a bird.
Okay.
Yes.
Here, come over here.
Okay.
Grab some flour
Trusting me with
on
this.
your hands.
Okay.
So there's 2 different ways to do birds. I'm going to move this
It's
rolling
like
pin
hand
out of the
sanitizer
way.
for everybody.
So, here, I'll give you this one to start with.
Okay.
We'll do
Have I mentioned how good it smells? I'm sorry. It's so good.
We'll do the first way. So the first way is actually just to tie a knot. So
Oh,
just
okay.
fold it over and then stick it through. And then you form the piece that you stuck through into like
Mine's gonna look like Big Bird. It's good.
into a point to be the beak.
Okay.
And then the tail end, you just flatten. And then this is where I would kind of shape it a little bit because I get finicky about things. So I would just kind of cut some little feathers into it. Yeah,
Oh,
little bird.
that's beautiful.
And
And
then,
you just place those on the bread as well.
yes,
Okay.
can you pass me that tall one closest to you? Yeah.
Definitely.
So this kind of showcases, as you can see, my bread cracks too, everybody at home. Don't be discouraged if your bread cracks. So this one here is the knotted guy that we just did.
Okay.
The egg wash kind of made him dark, so it's a little hard to see. But now we'll do the other way.
And the egg wash, do you put that on?
You're gonna put it on right before you put your bread in the oven.
Okay.
So for the second way to make birds, you want 2 pieces roughly the same length. For this one, it might actually be better if you use a rolling pin and have a flattened piece. Oh, thank you.
No problem.
So you would take one and you place it over top, and then you wrap. So for all intents and purposes, this is gonna be the body, and these are the wings.
Oh.
So you just kind of wrap it, and wrap it, and then point that. This is a very large bird.
That's a lot of prosperity then, right?
Yes. There you go. And then you just kind of wrap it around like that.
Beautiful.
This
And
is a
then-
very large bird. But you get the idea.
the
The
idea.
technique is there.
It's probably the more you practice too, the better you will be at this
Of
technique, right?
course.
Yeah. So now I guess you assemble everything and put
Yes.
it
So now what we would do is we would take,
3 hours later.
we're going to imagine that this has filled the entire pan, everybody. So now I'm going to just cut off the extra ends here. And you can lay it lengthwise across. You can make
Doesn't
a
matter.
halo. I just kind of do it personal preference. However, if my braids were short, I just lay them cross. If I made a really nice long braid that's symmetrical, I'll make a nice halo.
Loop it around, yeah.
Yeah, so then you, like that,
it's
we'll place our
beautiful.
little birdies on top. You know what, we'll do that after we egg wash it. So now we will start with an egg wash. So to make an egg wash, you just crack an egg and beat it. You can add a little bit of water if you'd like.
And does the water just, what does it do for it?
It'll just make it go a little bit farther. It'll also make it a little less brown.
Oh, okay.
So you can actually use this same recipe to make babka, which just is Paska with raisins.
Just add the raisin.
Yeah, so you can add a little bit of lemon juice or orange, as we were talking about before, and then make sure that if you're going to add raisins, you've let your raisins soak so that they have a lot of moisture in them before you incorporate them into the bread. This would be the stage right before putting in the pan that I personally incorporate my raisins. So once my dough has risen, then I incorporate the raisins. Some people can do it ahead of time, before the dough rises, to make sure that your dough's extra fluffy. I just wait because sometimes I make 3 that don't have raisins and 3 that do, and it's really hard to kind of figure out those ratios beforehand. So I've beat up my egg, and we're just gonna brush, lift it up a bit, brush it on top, and make sure you get all the nooks and crannies.
And if you don't, what happens? It gets
It just,
browner or just isn't?
it just adds a little bit of moisture,
Oh, okay.
and it helps kind of lock it in, and it helps make it a nice golden color.
Okay, like your examples here.
Yes. All right, so you see, and then I'm gonna add my birds 2 on top of the egg, so it helps them stick a little bit.
So you don't egg wash them in
I'm gonna egg
advance?
wash them
Just when they're on the...
after, yeah.
Okay.
Now, some people will make the birds completely separate. They'll make them, not let them rise at all, and then bake them in the oven and add them to their Paska afterwards. Some people will make their decorations out of a different type of dough altogether, just a salt dough. So that's kind of the fun part, is you get to just kind of play with it how you feel.
Yeah, it's not like a set in stone, this is what you have to do. It's,
Yeah, I'm just gonna
Make
add
it
this
you.
guy. Yeah, and trial and error. Have fun with it. Just because something was always done one way doesn't mean that you have to completely stick to the tradition. You can make it fit how you like to do things as well in your life, and make new traditions. Elaborate. So there you go.
that
And then
looks
you would
beautiful.
put this in the oven.
perfect. So we're gonna pop it in the oven.
So I'll just put it off the side here in
Perfect.
the oven. So now that you've baked it, and when I say baked it, I mean you've put it in the oven for 15 minutes at 400, and then you've dropped it down to 350 for the last 40 minutes or so. You're gonna put a toothpick, a skewer, a cake tester if you have one, which are really handy. And if it comes out dry and clean, you know it's baked.
I'm sorry, I can't stop smelling this. It just smells so good. You can just smell the saffron. Thank you. In all seriousness, thank you so much for bringing your culture to our table today and to sharing it with the world. Thank you all for joining us. This is our very last Folklorama at Home, the virtual experience. It's just been an honor to be with you for the past 11 weeks. Special thanks to the Manitoba government Safe at Home program. Huge thanks to Bounce Communications, to Tony, to Dean, to Y. It's just been so wonderful to work with such an amazing crew. To CCFM, thank you so much for this wonderful theater that we've been blessed to be in. And to all of you, thank you so much. Please stay tuned to Folklorama. Watch our website and our social media for some fantastic events still coming your way. Take care.